Well, I didn't think you had it in you.
I'm your huckleberry.
Why, Johnny Ringo, you look like somebody just walked over your grave.
Welcome back to the Dusty Blue Show, the show that digs deep into the biggest political stories affecting Missouri and beyond. I'm your host, Dusty Blue, and today we're talking about one of the most critical battles facing Missouri politics right now. The race for the Speaker of the House. As we approach the 2025 legislative session on January 3rd, two candidates are vying for this powerful role. John Patterson, one of the most liberal Republicans that you can name in our Missouri state capitol. And then on the other hand, Justin Sparks. Today, we're thrilled to have Justin Sparks, a proven conservative leader and candidate for Missouri Speaker, right here with us. Justin, thank you so much for joining the show.
It is my pleasure and honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let's, it's my pleasure, Justin. Thank you. And let's dive right into it because this race is heating up. And there's so much at stake. You're running to become the Speaker of the House, and it might be argued one of the most influential positions in Missouri politics. You've been in the legislature for a while, I believe 2021, is that correct?
Yeah, I've been there for 2 years, and I just was reelected my second term.
And you've seen firsthand the impact of leadership in our state politics. But for our listeners who may not be as familiar with the inner workings of the Missouri House, why is the Speaker's role so important? What kind of power and influence does this position hold, and how does it impact in everyday Missouri?
That's a great question, and you're right. Most people don't know their inner workings of their government, both on the federal level, but particularly on the state level. You know, when I was a policeman for 15 years, I'd vote in the election, and I had no idea what really was going on in our state politics. It was only around COVID, around 2020, where I really kind of started paying attention to what my government was doing on the state level. And I started realizing just how incredibly important that is. And I started asking myself a question of why certain things weren't getting done in Missouri, even though Missouri had a supermajority of Republicans in the House and the Senate, and all statewide elected offices, including the governor, were all Republicans. And yet the states surrounding Missouri were doing so many other great, wonderful things. States like Arkansas and Tennessee and Nebraska and others, Wyoming, states surrounding us were seeing great economic growth. People were moving there. Great conservative policies on all different levels and all different topics were getting passed. And yet in Missouri, they weren't. And I wanted to know why. And that started my journey. And for the first 2 years being in the legislature, I found out why. And it's an uncomfortable conversation that we must all have. An uncomfortable conversation that makes the actual politicians uncomfortable. But when people actually hear what's going on in Missouri, I see it everywhere I go. Their eyes open, and it's like this light goes off. And then it's kind of a gut check moment of like, how in the world did we get to this place? And what are we going to do about it?
So what are some of those things that you saw?
Yeah. Well, okay, so you got to remember, from my background in law enforcement, I knew nothing about politics. I just saw some things, you know, like I had referenced before, policies that weren't getting done, and yet we had these huge amounts of Republicans controlling our state. So I ran for office. I believed that the Lord really called me into this, just like he called me into law enforcement. I believe it was a deep calling to serve my community and my fellow man in a broader, greater way. And so my wife and I prayed about it, and we launched ourselves into this role. And just to let you and all your listeners understand what I was first exposed to is went down to Jefferson City, and you get sworn in, and then they tell you, go in the chamber and vote for the Speaker of the House. And at the time, I didn't realize that we had a choice, because they don't tell you you have a choice. They tell you the decision for who the Speaker of the House is going to be has already been made. And you just go in there and push the green button and vote for the Republican Speaker of the House. And at the time, I just assumed, like everybody else, you don't know what you don't know. You just assume that that's how it is. So I went in there, pushed the button for a speaker that was now going to control virtually everything in the Missouri House of Representatives, including anything I was going to try to do for my constituents or anybody else. Both good, bad legislation will completely be controlled by essentially a king. The Speaker of the House has complete centralized power now through a series of rules changes over the years that has virtually allowed him to control everything. And so I didn't realize at the time that I actually do have a choice. I did have a choice. It just wasn't afforded to me because the speaker had been chosen through an informal process in the Republican caucus a year before. And that's exactly what has happened now. And so a year ago, our caucus informally selected John Patterson to be the next Speaker of the House. And you probably ask yourself, why would we do that a year ago before all the new freshman legislators that just got elected can actually have a vote to say who the next Speaker of the House is going to be? And there's a reason for that. It's intentional. Because those freshman legislators, the ones that just got elected in November, they just got done knocking on thousands of doors and telling their constituents, I'm going to go up to Jefferson City and I'm going to drain the swamp. And I'm going to do what it is you sent me up there to do. I'm going to be a man or a woman of my word. And I am going to, uphold the values of truth, justice, and the American way. And then the very first thing they're going to be asked to do is vote for John Patterson, a man that has repeatedly shown himself to be essentially very liberal. This is a person that voted against the bill that would have prohibited transgender surgeries for minors, the SAFE Act. And this is a person that had blocked Second Amendment legislation last year after the Chiefs Celebration shooting, if you remember that. And this is a person
Is that the what was that? The Preservation Act, Second Amendment Preservation Act.
There was a couple Second Amendment bills that were supposed to would have allowed you to be able to carry a firearm on public transportation and bills like that. And after the essentially gang shooting at the celebration for the Chiefs Super Bowl, John Patterson, as the floor majority leader, blocked those bills from coming forward. And so we didn't even get to vote on them. He essentially killed the legislation because he's in a very powerful position. He can do that. And so even then, so that's going to make those freshman legislators in a tough spot, right? That's going to put them in a difficult position. And they're going to have to now go in January. They're going to be expected to go and vote for John Patterson as if there isn't another option because he'd had already been selected over a year ago. And see, I lost confidence in John Patterson for a series of things that he did, which I will describe here. And it was at that moment that led up to, in my own conscience, Amendment 3 passing and his role in Amendment 3 passing in our state that literally made me come to the decision that I was going to insert myself into the race for the speakership. So how I'm doing this is not the traditional way of how you would run for Speaker of the House, but it's what I believe I have to do. I believe there is no other option. And
but nothing that's happening right now is anyone that speaks out against the status quo, you're now the target.
Yes.
And so kind of coming in on what you were talking about there. So it sounds like to me, there's a lot of corruption going on down there. Now, I go back to your Facebook video that you made here 2 or 3 weeks ago when you first came out and announced this whole thing. One of the things that stuck out to me in that video was you were talking a lot about this pay to play. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that for the listeners here to kind of put that in perspective on what that means and how that intertwines into that status quo, into that establishment style Republican Party, and how you're separated from that. So what does that pay to play part look like?
Sure. It's funny that the pay to play has gotten so much attention, and it has upset my colleagues, my other fellow representatives. But so to make this as clear as I can for your listeners, so you have John Patterson, the man, and then you have John Patterson, the heir apparent for the Speaker of the House, the system that gave us the man. So you have John that has shown himself to be more liberal. Clearly, he votes against initiative petition reform, which would have prevented Amendment 3 from ever happening. And that's the #1 Republican priority platform for the last 8 years. He was the only Republican in the House to vote against it. He has blocked Second Amendment bills. He blocked HJR, House Joint Resolution 131, which would have been a competing question on the ballot to compete with Amendment 3. And that is a strategy that they used in Nebraska. They were successful in defeating their version of Amendment 3, and yet he blocked that in Missouri. He kept other members from signing a petition in order to bring that bill to the floor. He told other members of the Missouri House, don't even speak about this in caucus. So these things are troubling to me. I think they're even dangerous when you tell other members, other Republican members, don't even speak about this. And by the way, remember, I'm going to be the speaker, so I have all the power to affect your life for the next 2 years, right? But the system that gave us John Patterson is one that is truly what's behind all of this, because John would only be the speaker for 2 years, and then we'd move on to the next guy. And so people have asked me, can't you just outlast John and then go with the next guy? And the answer is no, because the
the damage that he would create while he was there. I mean, some of that stuff is irreversible, like Amendment 3. And not to interject, but to kind of emphasize more on Amendment 3 and IP reform. So IP reform was initiative petition, and that's how folks in the states, that's how we can go and amend our Constitution. And
Correct.
so right now, right now is the way it stands is IP reform. You want to amend the Constitution, you have to go out and get signatures for that initiative. You meet that signature requirement, then it goes back to the Secretary of State, then it goes on to the ballot for the vote. So right now, as the state's only thing that they need, anyone needs, is 50% of the population plus one single vote will then amend our Constitution. And this is where I have a huge problem with initiative petition, the way it's written right now, and why it's so desperately needed. Is we saw this back with the marijuana, recreational marijuana.
Yep, you're exactly right.
It overwhelmingly passed, and see, it was a little tighter on Amendment 3, and we'll get into that. But you know, if we would have had IP reform, now we would have had to have included congressional districts, which would essentially said, you know what, St. Louis, Kansas City, you're not going to be able to just push the edit button on our Constitution anymore. You're going to have to convince the rural communities, instead of continually trying to disenfranchise our vote or invalidate our vote because we don't have the population that they do. So Amendment 3 would have never happened if IP reform would have got passed. And
no,
it should
you're
have gotten
exactly right.
And it's not just because of we're speaking a lot about John Patterson because that's who we're running against, but this is a system at play. There is a large group of people that are down there that are pushing this status quo agenda, this pay-to-play system that's not affecting any of us here in the state of Missouri except for the left wing, right?
Yeah. So you hit the nail right on the head. What you have is a system that consistently selects leadership in the Missouri House and Senate that will do exactly what you just described. It will cause things like initiative petition reform to be killed every year repeatedly. So initiative petition reform, the way that our Constitution is changed and amended, has been the #1 Republican priority for 8 years. And for 8 years, it has been killed. And there's always an excuse, always. And you have to ask yourself why. So every time it's like, well, the House passed it, but the Senate couldn't get it done. And then the Senate Republicans say, oh, it's those darn Democrats. They stand up and they filibuster and we just couldn't get it done again. All of that are lies, because there's 2 people in the Missouri House, the floor majority leader and the Speaker of the House, and 2 people in the Senate, the floor majority leader and the Senate president, and they control everything. Anything they want to get done gets done. And it gets done within a matter of hours, okay? Because we have all the power. We have procedural mechanisms called the previous question that can shut down any debate from any Democrat or anybody and bring up any bill for a vote. See, this is truth and reality. It's not comfortable to have to call out my colleagues and say, no, you're not being truthful. You're being disingenuous to the people, because we can do whatever we want to do if we want to do it. But see, Dusty, there's very powerful special interests that have figured something out in Missouri, that if they pour millions of dollars into the initiative petition system and preventing reform to how our Constitution is changed, they can get things like recreational marijuana or unrestricted, unregulated abortion into our founding document and basically subvert the will of the people by going around their elected representation. That's what they've been doing. They've targeted Missouri, and, you know, it's marijuana, it's babies. Next year, it'll be the Second Amendment. They see that it has been working consistently. We're not the only state where they're doing this. They're doing this across the country in order to get around conservative majority states. And so you referenced pay to play. How does that really work? Well, let me explain something. I'll tell this story. When I first got down to Jefferson City 2 years ago, they brought all the Republicans to a special interest called the Missouri Farm Bureau, in which a big conference room and a fried chicken lunch. And when you went into the room, there was an envelope at every single chair with your name on it. You found your name in front of your chair, and in that envelope was one thing. It was a little card, and on the card was a dollar amount. $20,000 was mine. And there were different dollar.
Can I interject? Can I interject right here? So, who put these cards there, and who wrote these cards? Or
So-
not? Maybe not who, or what group, what organization, who and what did this? How did it? Like, where did it come from?
So our winter caucus is called Winter Caucus Meeting, only Republicans. It's sponsored by the House Republican Campaign Committee, the HRCC. And that they're basically an entity that accepts money from representatives in order to get other representatives elected. So they spend money in campaigns, on campaigns for other Republicans to get them elected. This is called the DC model. They do this in Washington, D.C. as well on the federal level. And in principle, the way that this system was designed is not illegal or unethical, right? Just contributing money to an entity to help your Republican colleagues get elected. Campaigns are expensive. There's nothing wrong with that. But here's what it has become. It has become an explicit exchange of money for power. And my colleagues don't like having this conversation. But I will be very clear here. This doesn't mean that every single representative that contributes money to the House Republican Campaign Committee is corrupt. It doesn't mean that every single representative that gives money to the HRCC is buying a position of power or influence. But some are. And it has become that way. And so when I went to that lunch and they gave me the card with $20,000 on it, I laughed. Because remember, I wasn't in politics. I had no idea what this was. And I said, what is this? And they said, this is the amount that you have to give HRCC. And I said, well, what happens if I don't give it? And they said, well, then you won't be on a powerful committee or a chairman of a committee, and you certainly won't be in leadership one day. And I said, well, I mean, I understand the concept of wanting to help Republicans get elected and contribute and help the team. But is there any safeguards? Is there any transparency or truth or accountability in these funds? Because these are my campaign funds that, mom and pops have given me, entrusted me to help me get elected. And they're trusting me that I'm going to use that money wisely, right? And so I don't want to just blindly give campaign funds to an entity that is going to decide how to spend them that I don't have any say over. And they said, no, you don't get any say over how the money is spent. They decide how to do that. You just have to do it because that's the way it's always been. You're going to hear that a lot in our talk today. That's just the way it's always been. That's the system we have. And
that's the status quo that we've been dealing with that's led us into these situations that we're currently in.
And so what you have now is, for example, in the last 3 weeks, multiple representatives have called me and they have said, Justin, I was contacted by John Patterson. He said, hey, I know you want to be chairman of this such and such committee. And they said, yes, I do. They said, and the very next thing he said was, how much money have you given to HRCC? Now, that's not necessarily illegal, right? I'm not indicting my fellow members. I'm not indicting John Patterson, right?
No, but on the surface, that sounds horrible.
It does sound horrible.
You're going to put it into context, but coming from the average listener of this, and if that was the only thing they heard, I know I hear the very first thing that comes to my brain is corrupt, right?
Right. Right.
Go ahead.
Right, because what does that sound like? That sounds like pay to play. You're paying to play, right? You want to be a chairman of this such and such committee, or you want to be on the budget committee, right? Another member was required to give $5,000 in order to be on the budget committee. Another member, like, this really does happen. It doesn't happen with every chairmanship. It doesn't happen with every representative, but it does happen. And my concern, this is what I told all of my colleagues at this past winter caucus meeting, was, guys, gals, this is my concern. If we keep going down this road, this is a corrupting system. And the system, we reference, how does the system select leadership? Well, if you enter the system and you show that you're willing to give large amounts of money to the House Republican Campaign Committee, then special interests will start to funnel more money and campaign checks to you so that you can turn around and continue to give those large amounts of money to HRCC. And in return, you will be considered for leadership. So they identify very early on, who can we give money to, who will then turn around and give it to the House Republican Campaign Committee, right? And then that person we can continue to prop up for leadership and put forth as a possibility for a floor majority leader and an eventual speakership. That's how it works. That's how the special interests, as you can see logically, right? The special interests see an opportunity to funnel large amounts of campaign contributions to certain members in order to then do what? Those members will then become leadership one day. And that's what it's all about. In order to control legislation in the state of Missouri, you have to control the leadership. And it's like this in D.C. too. Matt Gaetz just gave a speech like 3.5 weeks ago on his experiences in Congress. And there, he wanted to be on the Armed Services Committee. Well, that was going to be $75,000. They have explicit amounts too. And if you really want to know why we have such issues with a uniparty or a swamp or, you know, the administrative deep state in Washington, D.C. or in our own capital in Jefferson City, this is the very root of the problem. This is the heart of everything that's wrong in politics. It's uncomfortable. I know that people don't like to talk about it. My colleagues hate the fact that I'm talking about it. But Dusty, for 2 years, I've tried to reform this system. I've tried any other way that I could figure out how to fix this system from within, and I haven't been able to do it. And most of my colleagues from the very beginning have said, we need to fix this. We need to change this. There is a better way to do this. And yet the system is so powerful, it's almost impossible to change it unless you're the Speaker of the House. Because again, remember, he's all powerful and he can change all of these rules on day one.
So it sounds like something that, definitely needs to be reformed. And from the people, when we go to the voting polls to elect our officials to represent us, nobody has this stuff in mind.
No.
Everyone thinks that you're going to go down there and represent them in their best interest and adhere to that Republican platform and try to push that conservative legislation. But what we're hearing directly from a state rep is that we're simply seeing a situation to where if you have money, this is going to happen. Now, all of us know, I mean, we're not naive. We know that everything is revolved around the almighty dollar. I mean, there's no doubt about that. It's been that way for a long time, and I don't know that it's ever going to change. However, there's got to be something. What can the people do to help this situation, to get a true conservative leader like yourself into that leadership position without having to pay a ton of money back into the status quo to keep with that same vicious cycle?
Yeah, it's
So
really
what,
quite
what is it
simple.
that the people can do?
Right. It's really quite simple. Our system was never designed to have an all-powerful Speaker of the House. The Speaker has become all-powerful because every single session, so every 2 years, an election happens and a new session occurs. And the representatives vote on a rules package, right? The rules of the House, how we're going to conduct business, how bills are going to move, how much power the Speaker is going to have, and how much power the floor majority leader is going to have, okay? And with each cycle, we, the individual representatives, have given up more of our power to the Speaker of the House. And we have done that over time incrementally. So that 20 years now in the majority as Republicans, the Speaker is virtually all powerful. And this is why other representatives who would normally want to support what I'm doing, right? Support reform, change the system. They just don't believe that they can because they believe and they're being told that this would be political suicide to go up against the system that selects power, and the system has selected John Patterson. And I'm telling you right now, maybe those fears are not unfounded. Maybe they will catch a little heat. The time is now to reject the old way of doing things and the status quo. Because if we don't, we're going to eventually lose the majority because we as Republicans are elected to go and do what it is we say we're going to do and represent the will of the people. And for 8 years, the people have said, fix the initiative petition process of how our Constitution is amended. And yet for 8 years, Republican leadership has failed to do that. And now this has all finally come to a head because with the passage of Amendment 3, the people want to know why and how that could possibly have happened in Missouri. And there is a very real, specific answer to that question. It's not convenient, it's not comfortable, but it is reality. 100% Amendment 3 should have never happened in Missouri. It wasn't just because St. Louis, Columbia, and Kansas City, oh, there's just too many votes. It was only 48,000 votes. And by the way, upwards of $30 million poured into the state of Missouri on a deceptive ad campaign. So most people didn't even know what they were voting for, what Amendment 3 actually was. And yet, even beyond all of that, the Republican legislature knew Amendment 3 was coming. We knew it last year. We knew they were spending money. We knew that there was going to be a deceptive ad campaign, and we 100% could have stopped it. We could have stopped it through passing initiative petition reform for yet 8th year in a row that it failed last year, and we could have passed a constitutional amendment that would have put a competing question on the ballot, and yet it was blocked. Why was it blocked? It was blocked by Republican leadership. And my message to everybody listening and to all my Republican colleagues in the Missouri House is we don't have to continue doing this, going down this road repetitively. And if we don't stop electing liberal Republican leadership, none of this is ever going to change. You see, because the powerful special interests behind Amendment 3 or other issues like whatever, recreational marijuana, they want liberal Republican leadership to continue being elected and running the houses of power in our state capital because their values align with liberal values, not conservative values. Does that make sense? So that's
Absolutely.
why that is exactly why in Missouri we can't get conservative policies passed because the leadership both in the House and the Senate are controlled, and they've been controlled for a very long time. And unless we deviate off that path, nothing will ever change. And my concern is if we don't, then eventually the people are going to lose confidence in Republicans because Republicans aren't doing what it is we promised to do. And so that's where we're at. We're at a crossroads in the state of Missouri. Because there's a transformational moment happening in Washington, D.C. right now. The people elected Donald Trump, not because he was a Republican. They elected Donald Trump because he was a reformer, because he was going to take a hammer to that establishment system in Washington, D.C. And that's exactly what he's doing. And that's the same system is very much entrenched in state capitals all over the country and in Missouri. And we have to take that same hammer to that establishment system right here and now and deviate from this path and do what it is the people want us to do.
So we have a couple different things I'm noticing here. It's a trend is you have this liberal leadership. And if we trace that back to their districts, generally speaking, maybe not every case, but generally speaking, they come from a liberal district. Now, in my mind, tell me if I'm wrong here, but it seems like to me that if they were to run as a Democrat, they know they wouldn't get elected because
Right.
we're predominantly a Republican state and have been for a long time.
Right. No, you're
So
exactly
they run
right.
as a Republican, backed by the Democrats, to get into office and to push liberal ideology or liberal agendas. And then the
Yep.
other side of it is you have true conservatives. This has happened right here in my district. I have state rep. I have a senator, just like everyone else in the state, in their district. Both of mine, Cindy O'Laughlin, Ken Hayden, they both started off, in my opinion, they were very conservative. Had great conversations with them when they first announced their running, and had many conversations with them, supported them. I admit it, I voted for them. However, since then, they have now flip-flopped to where it seems like they are supporting these liberal leaders. My state rep, Ken Hayden, is supporting John Patterson. Now, makes no sense to me because we can look at John Patterson's voting record. You know, voting against the SAFE Act. Luckily, it still passed, but voting against IP reform. Did not even endorse President Trump.
Yeah.
But yet, I have a representative that's voting for him. And I think many of you listening to this, probably, and maybe a lot of your representatives are. And so what message can we give to them? Can they be calling their state reps, their senators,
Of course.
not necessarily senators because you're in the House, but they can call their state reps and say, hey, we are demanding that you cast your vote for Justin Sparks so that we can turn this ship around.
Yeah. No, you know what? And you said, should they call their state senators? Yes, they should. Because believe it or not, the House is in many ways very influenced by the Senate and by the senators themselves. So I encourage everybody, call your representative and call your state senator and ask them to weigh in on this issue. Weigh in on this issue. And when you do so, a lot of people are upset when they hear what's actually been going on for a long time in your state capital. And they get angry. And I understand that anger. But when you contact your elected leadership, instead of going at them and maybe yelling at them like you want to, because that's how you feel, tell them, listen, I understand the system that you're in, right? That you've basically been institutionalized up there, an all-powerful system that you don't think that you can change, but we can change it. And all you should do is your elected representatives should represent you, right? That's even in the name. And so they should listen to their constituency. So when you have these conversations with your representative or your senator, say, I want you to listen to me and I want you to represent me. And by the way, if you support Justin and you think that you're going to be committing political suicide or you're going to get blowback or retribution, listen, we're going to support you. We're going to lift you up. We're going to make sure that doesn't happen because you're doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And it's the only way that we can actually change the entire system. We can pass a rules package that will decentralize the power of the speaker voluntarily now. On day one, we can change and put safeguards and guardrails into how we give chairmanships and committee position to individual members. We can return that to a merit-based system instead of just how much money are you donating? Are you donating a lot of money to HRCC? We can do these things together on day one. We just have to believe and stick together and say, okay, we all agree we want to do these things. Let's go ahead and do it. And have that conversation with your representative. Have that conversation with your senator and say, in Missouri, we no longer want the status quo. We want the will of the people to be done and heard. That's the way our system was originally designed, and that's the way our system needs to return to. and we can do it together.
100%. I could not agree more. I think it can be done. It should be done. And I think with the right leadership, you as that leadership in that speaker role can certainly make that happen. I mean, so what would be your very first thing if you were elected Speaker of the House, January 3rd, 2025? What's the very first thing that you would like to do as your new position of Speaker?
Yeah, the very first thing we have to do is pass the rules package. A rules package that will decentralize the power of the Speaker himself and basically revert back to our system, at least to as far back as when we had the majority, in terms of making sure that individual bills that all the members file get a guaranteed hearing. So if you file a bill, the way it works right now, you can file a bill right now, and your bill might not be referred to a committee until the last day of session. That happens all the time. So it doesn't matter what bills you want or what bills you're working on. They may never even get heard in committee, right? Because they don't have to be referred until the very end of session. And there's no time. The session's gone. And so how does that really serve your individual districts from all over Missouri, right? Again, it's going back to, well, now you have to go to the Speaker and you have to try to curry favor with him in order that he will maybe let your bill go to committee. And then after it goes to committee, you have to get that committee chairman to give you a hearing and then a vote to actually pass that out of committee. And then that bill goes through a series of rules committees. There is just so many hurdles where your legislation can be throttled and killed unless you do something for other people. The entire system is transactional. And so what we can do is by changing the rules and decentralizing the power of the Speaker, you can say each bill will get a hearing. Each bill will get an automatic referral to a committee within a certain time frame, 24, 48 hours, right? And then you can actually get rid of the rules committees so that you can actually eliminate some of those hurdles for those bills getting to the floor. And so what you can actually do is empower the people by empowering the individual representatives themselves. And then whatever legislation each individual representative thinks is good for their district, they can file, and that bill will actually get its day in court. That bill will actually get a hearing in which people can testify and support, and other representatives can co-sponsor. So on day one, the rules package has to get passed, and the power of the Speaker has to be decentralized. Number two, we have to come up with a coherent strategy of tackling Amendment 3. This is something that is absolutely the number one priority to my constituents and me personally, but to constituents all over the state of Missouri. They want to have an actual strategy, both constitutionally and statutorily, of how do we disassemble and address all of the issues in Amendment 3, and there are many. And then, of course,
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was leading me right into my next question. There is Amendment 3. I've gotten personally a lot of questions about that. Is now that has passed, is there any reversal mechanisms that could be used to counter this or potentially remove it? Obviously, the people have spoken here on obviously a whole host of bad information on Amendment 3. However, the powers that be, here we are, and this has happened. So what can you guys do as legislators, again, to reverse this, to counteract it? What does that look like? I get a lot of questions on that, and I don't know how to answer that because I'm not certain. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, there is a good answer to it as well, because we are in a critical juncture right now. Because right now, Amendment 3 is in the courts, and it's going to be in the courts. There's a hearing this week, right? Because immediately lawsuits were underneath the new Amendment 3, lawsuits were filed by Planned Parenthood in order basically to start generating the death of babies again, right? It's a big business. It generates a lot of revenue, and they're committed to it. So we have this very short frame of window, a window of time in order to address Amendment 3 before actual human beings are going to be destroyed through abortion. So how we do it is we have to go back to the voters, and we have to go back to the voters on the ballot with clear accurate information of what kind of restrictions on abortion do the majority of voters in Missouri want, right? In my own opinion, I believe that we need to define what a person and a human being is. And so how do we do that? A person in Missouri or anywhere else is actually pretty simple. A unique genetic code, a developing human life that will, left undisturbed, will grow into a full adult, mature human being. That's all. That's all it is. Because the life that's growing inside a woman is, in fact, a natural process. It's a natural process of human reproduction. And that life is genetically unique. It is not that woman and it is not that man. It is a combination of those two genetic codes to form an individual, unique, like a fingerprint, growing a natural process within the woman. That's human reproduction. Left undisturbed, that life, that healthy, growing, unique human genetic life will in fact become a mature human being. And that is what a person in Missouri must be defined at within our Constitution, deserving of equal protection under the law regardless of age, meaning that unique human life should be protected under our law regardless of how old that life is, whether that life is 99 years old and is in a comatose state, or whether that life is 15 weeks old, right? Because both of those lives are unique, healthy, and individual, and deserve to be protected. And we have to go to the voters very clearly, like I just articulated, and enshrine that into our Constitution. And so that is what we can do. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think that IP reform should be passed prior to
Absolutely.
that action there, or your action, or that action first and then IP reform? What? Kind of outline that for me.
Yeah, both should be done. Just because Amendment 3 passed doesn't mean initiative petition reform shouldn't be the law of the land. It absolutely should. It's been the #1 platform priority for 8 years for good reason. Because what we wanted to do last year was concurrent majority ratification, meaning instead of just having a 50% plus one, you would have a 50% plus one majority in 5 of the 8 congressional districts. So instead of just getting that 50% plus one majority in the entire state, which of course is always dominated by what? The 3 big cities. Instead, you get a broad representation from all over the state within congressional districts, meaning congressional districts represent the entire state. So you basically have to get 50% plus one from everywhere in order to change our founding document. That's the way I believe we should do. We should do that on day one. That bill should be filed and we should be championing.
Do you think, given, with respect to the Senate, do you think IP reform has a chance of making it through the Senate? Now, keep in mind, Cindy O'Loughlin, President Pro Tem, do you think it's possible to get that through the Senate? Or do you even think it'll pass the House? Now, it did pass the House last year. I'll let you speak on this. You know more about it than me because you were there. I did spend quite a bit of time down there, but especially during all the filibustering and so forth, which kudos to the Freedom Caucus for doing that and all that they did last year to get that through. But go ahead and shed some light on that for us.
Yeah, this story is really interesting and most people don't know it. So the whole reason the Missouri Freedom Caucus was born and founded, I am a founding member, is because of initiative petition reform failing year after year after year after year. And so we had become so frustrated, we decided to form the Missouri Freedom Caucus and stand together in order to get initiative petition reform passed out of the House and the Senate. And so what happened was we first passed it out of the House, okay? John Patterson voted against it. He was the only Republican to vote against it, but we did pass it in spite of him and sent it over to the Senate. The senators then wanted that bill, because it's the #1 priority, to be brought up and voted, and yet they were blocked by leadership. So they began filibustering.
Republican leadership. They were blocked by Republican leadership.
Again, Dusty, you're seeing a common theme here, right? This is the same theme we'll talk about constantly. So Republican leadership is opposed to initiative petition reform because very powerful, very well-funded special interests don't want it to pass. And so my Republican colleagues in the Senate started filibustering. And they basically shut everything down. And as part of a deal, they went around and they got signatures, right, of all the individual senators saying, if you guys will stop filibustering and let all these other bills go through, then on the last day of session, we will file the previous question motion called the PQ that will shut down debate and bring up initiative petition reform for one final vote. Okay? And they actually had a real, actual physical piece of paper where each individual senator signed their initials, and that piece of paper was held by another senator. And so the Republicans, the Freedom Caucus members agreed, and they stopped filibustering. Fast forward to the last day of session, and now, of course, we're expecting that motion to be put forward. Senator Mary Elizabeth Coleman, who was the handler of the initiative petition bill on the Senate side, she said, okay, this is my bill. I'll make the motion for the previous question to shut down debate and make this final vote. So she took the piece of paper with all the signatures from Senator Ben Brown's hand. She went to the floor of the Senate, and instead of filing the motion to shut down debate and pass initiative petition reform, she threw it away. And she made a motion to go to conference, which immediately kills the bill. That killed the bill. That's how initiative petition reform failed yet again, right? For 8 years, Republican leadership was able to kill the #1 platform priority of the Republican Party in the state of Missouri. Yet again. And
Just incredibly
that's how we're here
sad.
today.
Yeah, just incredibly sad, and
yeah.
it's disgusting. To be honest with you, I think everyone in the state on the conservative side that supports the Freedom Caucus and all that you guys do is just how you guys continue to have that energy and that drive and that motivation to keep fighting this machine is, I mean, it's incredible. And I just thank you guys for continuing to do that.
No,
Because if it wasn't for guys like you and ladies, you know, that are down there in our legislature that do believe that we can get past this and get IP reform pushed through and finally beat the corrupt powers that be, you know, it's just kudos to you guys.
thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. We appreciate
You know,
it.
and I think Trump's been doing this a lot over the last 8 years. You know, we're seeing this. Trump, I mean, went to D.C. with a mandate, the overwhelming vote that he received in the November 5th election. And to me, that gives us a slimmer of hope in the state of Missouri, and along with other states, is that, you know, Trump has just completely reformed the Republican Party. It's no longer the establishment. And I think the conservative movement is certainly it's growing much quicker now, I think.
It is.
The grassroots is starting to make moves, and it's starting to work. And so I
Yeah.
think we do have that. And I think we have a lot more people now that are involved with politics that otherwise normally wasn't 8 years ago, 4 years ago, 2
100%.
years ago. And that makes a huge difference because now we have more people willing to call those senators, to call those representatives, their legislatures, you know, and they're voicing their demands and opinions and what they believe they should be doing. And that's putting pressure on those legislatures because at the end of the day, that's how we're going to beat it, is Justin Sparks can't do it alone.
That's right.
You know, the Freedom Caucus members can't do it alone. It's going to take a collective effort of the people in the state that genuinely care right of life. I mean, instead of this pro-choice stuff and recreational marijuana and this constant edit button on our Constitution, it's going to take the people to consistently call and email and text if you have your legislature's numbers and get on your local committees. And we're going to be talking about that at a later date, but you know, get on those local county committees, the Republican Central Committees, and start demanding that these legislatures fulfill the will of their constituents in their districts. And I think that's what's inevitably going to change it. And we're seeing that on the national side with Trump, is people are standing up. They're no longer, how long did people go to where, I've seen this time and time and time again. I've been public with my politics for a long time. But there's a lot of, I'm a business owner, and there's a lot of business owners that refuse to get involved with that because they're afraid of some sort of retaliation, retribution, or they may lose business. And now we're seeing a different side of that. They are beginning to say, you know what, enough is enough, because it's no longer about us. It's about our kids. It's about our grandkids. What is the state? What does the future of this country look like long after we're gone?
Yep.
And it takes a collective effort from everybody. And I can't be more thankful than I am today to see Trump back going to the White House, and we see his cabinet coming together. We see, look at these guys on the Freedom Caucus, Justin Sparks and many others that are fighting for us right here in the state of Missouri. Now, let me ask you this, Justin. How do you feel about the speaker race right now? Do you think they're starting to turn around with the attention? I've seen you on news media. I've seen you on social media. The word is getting out there, Justin, that you are here and you're not going anywhere. But are they seeing that?
Well, Dusty, all we have is our vote and our voice as representatives. And I'm trying to use both. I had already come to the conclusion that I had lost confidence in John Patterson and his ability to lead the caucus because he was blocking Republican priority legislation after he got that informal nomination for speaker. And so I started to see, oh my gosh, we're going to have basically an all-powerful tyrant, a king that is opposed to everything that I want to do. So already I was struggling with the fact that I couldn't vote for him. And yet I also have my voice. I feel very strongly about issues, particularly like Amendment 3 and protecting the unborn, the preborn. And so I thought, have I done everything I possibly could? Have I given everything in order to do what it is I told the people that I would do? And so what could I do? I could put my name in the hat for being Speaker of the House. I can do that. I can use my voice to speak truth and hopefully inspire some courage and intestinal fortitude from my colleagues. I know that this is not the way that we normally do it, and I'll just tell you right now, this is 100% a David versus Goliath moment. But it's a moment that must be had, because if I didn't take a step forward, no one would. There isn't anybody else. Dusty, I'm not the best candidate to do this. I'm not the most talented tactician, politician guy, right? Because I'm just a former police sergeant. But let me tell you something. I am the one that is willing to do it. And I'm hoping that this kicks that door open and starts this conversation that must be had in our state. This must be had. You were talking about that Donald Trump moment and what he's doing on that national stage. It's so true. I've had so many people, Dusty, tell me, I want to donate to your campaign to help you, but I will not give you money if you're using the national GOP platform, the WinRed platform of accepting donations, because the GOP takes a percentage of that in exchange for letting you use their infrastructure. And so I had to literally create my own portal where people could donate to me and it would go directly to my campaign, because so many people are so fed up and sick of the establishment being ineffective and not doing what it is that we say we would do, that they don't want not $1 going to that national machine. And I think the same sentiment applies everywhere. And my colleagues, my message to them is like, wake up, guys and gals. This is the future. People, normal, wonderful, good, hardworking Missourians are waking up everywhere. And everywhere that I go and speak, the rooms are packed. And they all have the same look on their face, which is, what in the world is going on in Jefferson City, and how do we change it?
Yeah. Well, Justin, I want to thank you for coming on today. And what is that website, or where can we go to donate to Representative Justin Sparks?
SparksForMissouri.com and Sparks for Missouri on Instagram and Justin Sparks on Facebook. And
awesome. Is there anything else you wanted to share with the people?
No, it's been a great conversation. I kudos to you for using your voice and weighing into this battle space in order to be a voice of the people. I'm telling you, it's people like you that are going to really lead the charge, and we're going to see real change in this state. I guarantee it. We will see it.
I think you're right. And I'm going to keep fighting because you're going to keep fighting. And that it's just that snowball effect. I mean, it's just contagious, and I think we're seeing a lot of that all across the state. I sit on county committee. I'm our legislative district 43 chair, and
awesome.
Constantly out there and trying to get the word out. And we're seeing a movement. We have been for a little while, but I think now we're really seeing it, and it's because of guys like you, Justin. I'm so thankful that you came onto the show today. Thank you for everything that you said, your wisdom, and we're going to be praying for you.
Thank you.
We've got your back. And I hope everybody goes out to all of the social media websites where you can reach him. Donate anything that you can to go to him to help him fight against this establishment and the corruption that he's up against, this David versus Goliath. We know how that ended. God always wins and prevails in the end. And I think a humble man like Justin Sparks here deserves it. He needs it. We need it. Guys, I want to thank you for joining the show today. Stay tuned as we dig deeper into the next one. Justin, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll be talking with you soon.
Thanks, buddy. God bless you.
Hey, you too.